For as long as I can remember, I've dreamed of making a game. A few years back, I started trying to make good on that dream, but over the years, my project just grew in size and my life was just speeding up. So I gave myself 12 months to start over and do things differently. A new project and a fresh start. And this is how it went. A couple years back, I started working on my first commercial game, and I went hard at it. I spent most of my free time working on my game, and I was even making videos about it. I was loving the process, but I was starting to travel a lot for my job, and I also found out that I was going to be a father soon. And with all of that and a debatably unhealthy addiction to Age of Empires 4, my free time was vanishing, and the scope of my project was only increasing. This led me down a really difficult path. I would sometimes go weeks without touching my game, and it was tough. Frankly, life was good, but the reality of launching a game was slowly fading. All around me, the industry was changing, and I was just treading water. I had to launch a game, so I just kept going with my existing project. But deep down, I knew something had to change if I was ever going to finish a game. I was working on a day-night cycle for my game when I decided it was probably time to add some enemy characters. And for these, I'd been wanting to experiment for a while with active ragdolls. These are essentially the standard ragdolls that you've probably seen in many games, but capable of balancing and moving on their own. But I had no idea how to make these, like none. I tried some things and it was hopeless at first, but gradually it started to show some promise. I needed a way to test interacting with these, so I added some basic combat. Then as I was playing around with them, a new thought began to emerge. This was quite fun. Could I create a game around just the ragdolls alone? I'd already been toying with the idea of making a smaller game, and I'd even prototyped some things, but I'd abandoned most of them for one reason or another. But now I had a mechanic that I liked. And if I made a smaller game around this, I might actually be able to launch something in a reasonable time frame. I didn't want to pause my other project, but my goal was to try and launch a game, and my other project felt like it was getting too big for this point in my indie career. So I made a painful but perhaps necessary decision to temporarily shelve that game and go and work on something smaller and more manageable. And I gave myself 6 months to try and make some prototype that I could use to prove to myself if I had a good idea or not. I thought that if I had something after that, then I'd push ahead for another 6 months and try and complete the game. If I didn't, I would scrap it and reevaluate. But the idea needed some more work. The ragdoll combat alone was very one-dimensional, so I added some complementary mechanics. I focused on designing some dynamic movement and some FPS combat, and the goal of the game would be simple. Get to the end of the level as fast as you could. The focus would be on mastery of the mechanics as opposed to a story-driven narrative. But now I had an idea, it was time to do the work. For the movement mechanic, I wanted it to feel free and intuitive. I wanted the player to have a clear destination, but with many possible lines to take to get there. The level would be linear, but feel somewhat like a skate park, where you have all sorts of lines to take. I opted for parkour-style movement mechanics that would be simple on the surface, but offer depth in how they could be chained together. There's a lot of fine-tuning of details to get to a system that felt responsive and fun, but after some time, I had the core movement system. For the combat, I designed it like most FPS systems that you're probably familiar with. I added a few different weapon types, each with their own behaviors, and I also added a few unique features such as the ability to grab objects and throw them. But the ragdolls themselves needed lots more work. They needed to learn to take a fall. This was simple enough, but getting them back up, not so simple. They'd also faceplant into walls constantly, and they couldn't even move themselves independently. Perhaps the hardest part of all of this was making the damn things stand still. And once I'd done that, I also needed to make them capable of independently moving and give them some means of damaging the player. For the combat, just giving them weapons felt too cheap, so I made them physically hunt you down instead, as I felt this was more intimidating for some reason. After some time, the ragdolls were at a decent state, and I had my free core mechanics. But now I was about halfway into the 6-month window that I'd given myself, and it was time for me to step away to focus on becoming a father. Today's the 4th of September, so it's interestingly, it's one day before my daughter's due date. This was truly an exciting time, and it flew by. Life was different now, but as with anything, you soon settle into a routine. And as things settled with me, I started getting excited about the idea of working on my game again. After around 1 month, I reopened my project for the first time. I was greeted with an unpolished prototype of a game. Until now, all of the small details and imperfections hadn't really mattered, but now I was looking towards how to turn this into a launchable game, and I soon realized the enormity of the task that laid ahead. I tried to move forward, but each attempt felt poorly implemented. I felt like I was right back where I started, in the same position I was in with my previous project. Not only that, but now my YouTube channel that I'd worked so hard to establish had become stagnant. And I just didn't want to share something that was so unfinished. I got stuck in this hole for weeks. I got by just adding little extra bits here and there and slowly developing the content. And I even took a small hiatus from this game to focus on another game that I eventually shelved, thankfully. But soon I was nearing the end of the 6 months that I'd given myself. And ultimately, I realized I wasn't going to have a game in this 6 months. But I shouldn't stop. I had the ingredients for something potentially fun, and my prototype showed me that. I just needed to craft the mechanics into a finished product. To move forward, I had to take a step back and focus on becoming a better designer. My first focus was the core game loop. I focused on giving the game a clear start and end point that I could iterate on and improve. And to make the content more interesting, I made the goal to climb to the top of something and fight enemies along the way. And I would rely heavily on verticality to add risk and tension as you progress through the game. But to complete this loop, I also had to address a key question. How do you handle failure in a game like this? I didn't like how fixed checkpoints immediately removed any sense of risk, and I'm aware of the popularity of a whole genre of games that rely on high consequence for failure, and I really liked this, but I didn't want it to be frustrating for everyone who just wanted to play the content. So I instead opted for placeable checkpoints. This would give the player choice in how they play the game, and you would be rewarded for different playstyles, such as completing the game without any checkpoints. Now you can place these wherever you like throughout the level, but to do so takes time and they're limited in number. And with that, I had the core game loop and the path to completion felt much clearer. But I realized quickly that I'd need to adjust the movement mechanics in my game to account for the new verticality in the design. Just jumping up ledges was repetitive, so I added a climbing mechanic. I went back and forth with how I should make this work. Like, should you be able to just climb certain areas, or should you be able to climb everything? I wanted the movement to feel truly unrestricted, so I've just made it so you can climb any wall. And I also did a similar thing for the wall running too, but added an energy bar to prevent this from becoming overpowered. And to tie it all together, I also added a few other mechanics, such as sliding and rope swinging, and jetpack, because, well, jetpack. Now things were much better and the game was much more developed, but I was around 10 months into the 6-month challenge that I had set. And although I had more gameplay, I still didn't have a level. And level design is hard. I tried, but every time I tried, it just felt like I had something that was unpolished. Like, it wasn't an end-to-end level. It felt like I'd just thrown a load of things together and it just didn't look good. So again, I had to take a step back and study this. Level design is just one of those things that I both love and hate. Designing the level is one thing, but there's also other skills that are wrapped up into this. Things such as modeling, lighting, and materials, etc. All of these were things that I had to brush up on. I'm still not great at any of these things, but I feel I'm good enough for the type of game I want to make. And perhaps most importantly, I found a process for creating levels that felt manageable. And I was beginning to iterate, and each attempt was getting slightly better than the previous, so I felt I was progressing. But now I was hitting the 12-month mark, and I still didn't have my final level design. But I needed to put my management hat on and start planning ahead toward a feasible release date, and think about the other things that go into doing this, beyond just designing levels. So I registered my studio officially and created my Steam page. And that brings me to now. I'm still working on the level and the content, as well as a few back-end systems, but level design is just one of those things that you can't rush. And being 12 months in, I had a dilemma. Keep going in silence until it's done, or begin sharing what I have. I think in hindsight, it would have probably been more sensible to stick to my original idea and maybe bring that down in scope, as I already had a lot of systems that I'd spent a lot of time developing, and I still really want to finish that game. But going off and doing this side project has taught me a lot of things. You know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I think that's one of the lessons that you have to learn yourself by doing it. It's been a really fun process, and if you're still watching, thank you. I'm gonna start posting more regular updates about this game and anything else I do. So yeah, I hope to see you again in my next video. Bye.